Shove it, man!
Alright, Shove It Squad. Today is just a random video because I happened to find an old save recording on my Xbox and I thought, let's load this up and see what kind of wacky things the Hawk was doing as a kid. I didn't expect to find too much, but then, as I went on, I found out that I was the one who created Bray Wyatt's gimmick. That is madness. I just knew I had a mind for the business, but someone give this Hawk a job because he'd be creating gimmicks left, right and centre. Now the game we'll be playing is SmackDown vs Raw 2009. This is not a game review because, to be honest, the game isn't incredible. It's more about the crazy save file I had. Now all of the people featured in this video are real people, so I have masked some of their names because I don't want anyone getting any grief or any insults. I don't know what you guys are capable of at the end of the day. But let's check it out. Now as you can see, the Hawk was a massive fan of created wrestlers. I was always on cause.ws, printing off all the sheets. I was practically burning down the rainforest on my own. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, gorillas, but I guess they're getting the rain back on me nowadays. But as you can see, we've got a pretty decent Submerger, pretty decent Alex Shelley, and Christian Cage with muscles. Although, I have no idea why he created Michelle McCool. It's not like the Hawk was some sort of super fan of her. That's random. Now, the first real wrestler we find is someone called Higgins. And I believe his gimmick is that he's a conspiracy theorist. It says 9/11truth.org on his top. Now, when I was growing up, I didn't know that much about America. A lot of my humour came from South Park and Family Guy, which meant they were constantly talking about 9/11, and I guess that's like where I got this gimmick from. I don't believe it's conspiracy theory at all. It was just part of the humour, I believe. Don't hit me with a brick. I'm sorry to anyone who lost anyone in that thing. It's serious stuff. But I believe the point in this gimmick was that he would go around spreading stuff between wrestlers to make them hate each other. A bit like Just Joe's gimmick in 2001, but a bit more nerdy. And in fact, I didn't even know about that Just Joe gimmick in 2001 because he was mainly on the C Show and I certainly did not watch that back in 2001. So I guess I came up with this on my own. And me and whoever came up with that gimmick aren't too different.
The following contest is scheduled for one fall.
Whose music is that? Is that Snitsky's music? I'm not even sure. But this is horrible. Look at those spots on his face. This guy was definitely a nerd. He was actually a really nice guy as well. I'm sorry if he watches this ever. He's not going to watch this ever. Now I can clearly remember this dude in real life. He was really strange when he'd fight because he would turn bright red and he'd make these weird huffing and puffing noises. I can't describe it. It's like nothing you've ever heard before. It was like... And he was a bit like Festus, because when the bell would ring, this guy would kick some serious ass. But before the bell rang, he was a complete jobber. Anyone could beat him up. The next guy seems to be T. Mitchell, who has a Scotty 2 Hotty rip-off gimmick. He obviously was a very cool person in my eyes, so I made him too cool, I guess. Not much to say. Nobody wants to see a Scotty 2 Hotty gimmick in 2023. Useless. Another pretty large part of my childhood was this guy called Weston. He had a massive head, and he had a hillbilly gimmick. His head just kept growing and growing as he got older, and he would regularly use it as an actual weapon in the playground to destroy kids with. But his head wasn't his only weapon. He also had these two buck teeth that he would use to bite people with, and to infect them with because he wouldn't clean them. So the grime from his teeth would kind of sink into the skin and leave people with some serious health problems. So of course in this game, as many of his moves as possible were bites and headbutts. Even his finish is a damn headbutt. And being hit with that brick, you're not going to be able to get up from that, trust me. The only real story I can remember about this guy was during a playground fight. He flew forward and somehow his head hit the ground and his teeth got stuck in the mud. Like his two front teeth were jammed in the mud like out of something like a cartoon. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And it didn't help him because he was stuck with this gimmick after that. Next up, we've got a man called Little Mikey. Oh no.
Michael.
This is not a fairy tale. Oh, son of a dad, you aren't to leave your wedding turning super still. I'm the angriest.
I forgot there was custom theme music on this game. And this is a sign of what the Hawk was listening to back then. It's probably why I'm such a weird person now. Now, Mikey's whole gimmick was that he was small, hence the name Little Mikey. So he had no upper body strength, and all his moves had to be trips and cruiserweight type moves. He was also a very cheeky individual. I can remember for some reason it used to be a thing with this guy that people would try and fisherman suplex him. Maybe because he was just small and no one could pull off any other sort of suplex, but people were locking that knee and throwing him backwards all the time. And he hated it. One of the favourite stories I have about this guy is he would like to play this game called Pull the Rope. Basically, he'd gather two groups of people on either side of a road, and the two groups would pretend that they were pulling an imaginary rope across the road. And this would actually make cars stop in their tracks because they thought there was an obstruction in the road. It always worked. And this guy loved playing this game because he was a cheeky little prick. And he would scream out in this high voice. He had a high voice, by the way, to go with his little body size. He would keep screaming out, "Pull the rope!" Yeah, I missed that guy. I wonder what happened to him. So basically, a cheeky little bastard who does annoying things and then uses other people to get away with his actions. So it's Hornswoggle then. KJ was a fisherman, and I got really carried away with the creative finishers on this game, even though they pretty much suck. Fish knife, fish bomb. We get it, he's a fisherman. But in real life, this guy was a Boy Scout. Now, he was quite sly, because everyone thought he was a goon, but he joined the Scouts just as a reason to get laid. Now, the Scouts were letting in women, and most of the people in the Scouts were complete nobodies who weren't interested in women. But he was, and he absolutely cleaned up. He took every woman there was in the Scouts, and it was like his own sex club. The Scouts was a sex club, and not in the homosexual way for once. Now, the Hawk might have tried doing the same thing as him, but I was kicked out before I had a chance.
KJ.
The following contest is a ladder match.
His music is just me screaming out his name, and then this blue piece of theme music plays. At least I was putting effort in back then. A lot of people just be putting random body parts together and calling it a day on these creative wrestlers. Not the Hawk. The Hawk was in it for the long run. By the way, screw ladder matches on this game. It took me 20 minutes to win this match, even though I had the other guy on red health all over. You're tugging down the belt, you're desperately trying to get it, and there is no way to speed this up. You're just there like a moron, dangling from the belt, and it won't come down. And it took me about 20 attempts to loosen and lower the bar down until I could finally get the belt down. Screw this match, I'm never playing it again.
Stone in the nation.
Oh wow, that is horrible. The Nation of Domination sang by the Hawk. Now this guy seems to have a Rocky Maivia crossed with Ken Shamrock gimmick. He thinks he's The Rock, but he does a lot of submissions like Ken Shamrock. I guess Shamrock is... It's JC Ice and Marky D! Now this guy was one of the most vicious people on the school playground. You did not want to get on his bad side, because he was sending kids to hospital doctors left and right. This is a legit thing. And it's a gimmick that might be something they could do with nowadays, because it's something quite interesting. Now the Stone's finisher was a headlock, which sounds like absolutely nothing at all. And it wouldn't have been. But the Stone would always wear this watch, and it was a special chunky sports watch, you know, the sort that all the kids used to have back in the day. And he would put the headlock on. At the same time, his watch would be crushing into your temple, and it was knocking people out. People would turn red, they'd be panting and tapping their arm and trying to get out of the move, but the move was unbreakable, and it would knock you out. And this guy had zero remorse for who he knocked out. If you got on his bad side, headlock, it was going to be over. A lot of kids play fighting, but this dude wasn't playing, he was just fighting. And because you're kids, you don't really think about it. You don't think I could take my fist and smack him in the head to get him off. Because punching in the face was kind of not allowed when you were a kid. But knocking people out was allowed for some reason. Now, despite there being creative finishers in this game, there's nothing you can really do with a headlock on this game, so this guy doesn't have a headlock as a finisher. But he did also like to do this other move that he called the legendary knee drop, where he would get you on your side, run up to you, and then jump with both knees slamming into your ribs. Again, he was doing it legit. This guy was a horrible wrestler. So not only was he knocking people out, he was also breaking people's ribs. Not the sort of guy you could be friends with. And that entrance music he had was a legit thing. Everyone at school used to sing that song to him. Most of the kids didn't even know what the Nation of Domination was, or probably didn't even watch wrestling. But everyone knew the Nation of Domination song, and they'd sing it at him to wind him up, and it always worked. Now we move on to Dave Wyatt. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to make this video when I first spied this guy. He's a Wyatt family member, but I made this in 2009 before they were even a thing. So it's madness that I did this. And the whole story behind David Wyatt is an interesting one, to say the least. Dave Wyatt was a legendary person in our childhood, and nobody ever met him. Not that I was friends with, at least. So we didn't even know what he looked like, so this is what I imagined the evil Dave Wyatt character would look like. Dave Wyatt was a guy who owned many farms in the local area, and he'd use his influence in the town to do whatever he wanted. It was basically mob rule. He had a gang of feral children working for him as well, who would do his bidding and stick up for him no matter what. If you said a single bad word about Dave Wyatt, it was like the whole town would come down against you, like a ton of bricks. But the stories don't stop there with Dave Wyatt. Not only was he like a cult leader and a farmer, but he was also potentially someone who had murdered people. At least that's what the legendary stories said when we were kids. Kids are stupid, and we used to try and provoke him in a way. We'd be out hanging around in the cornfields at 2 AM, like something out of a horror film, and suddenly the entire field would go from pitch black to a wash in light, as a jeep came racing across the field, full headlights on. You'd be blinded, you wouldn't know which way we're going. Kids were scattering left, right and centre. They had no idea what was going on. You'd try and hide in the cornfield, and somehow he always seemed to get closer to you. There was rumours that he carried a shotgun with him. For those of you in the US, not many people in the UK have guns, but farmers do. And Dave Wyatt certainly had a farmer's shotgun. There are stories that he'd killed people with this shotgun. There are stories that he'd beaten people with the butt of the shotgun. And then there were stories that he held people up and made them piss their pants, just for his amusement. An absolutely terrifying character, and the kids he had backing him up weren't much better. These people were cult-like followers of the worship of David Wyatt. He would buy their support by basically letting them do whatever they wanted on their farm. I grew up and got out as quickly as possible, what can I say? And still, to this day, I don't know if he even existed in the first place. How mad is that? And one of Dave Wyatt's big followers was a kid called Casey. Casey was a very antisocial person who would have problems with everyone. He was a bully in the town, and everyone was scared of him, but mainly because his big brother was more dangerous than him. You would be getting into a fight with him, and then suddenly you'd hear him calling out, "Harvey!" and his brother would come and throw you through the air, and he was practically breaking kids' necks. You were scared of Casey because you were scared of his brother. That was the whole deal here. Now, Casey would ride around the town on his bike in the middle of the night. It was like something out of the Warriors in a way. Everything would be dead silent, and then you'd hear this very slight squeaking of a bike coming down the road. And you just knew you had to run for cover. Because if he saw you out on his street late at night, he was gonna have problems with you. Although I have no idea why he's got this music, it doesn't seem very suitable for a scary character.
Casey!
He was one of the main characters on Dave Wyatt's farm, and he made lots of comments about the things that Dave Wyatt was letting him get away with whilst on the farm. He was telling people that he was milking pigs, that he was racing goats, that he tied a chicken to a quad bike and drove it into a river. The stories he was coming out with was insane, and it only built to his aura. Dave Wyatt's aura, I mean. Because this guy had everything that you wanted. Rumour has it, in fact, that Casey was raised on pig milk, and it turned him into the man that he is today. He, of course, has the most feared manoeuvre in all of wrestling as his finisher, the Case Paler, which I have to admit, around 15 years later, is still a pretty good name for a finisher. Now we have probably the most embarrassing entrance music I created.
Customs.
The following contest is scheduled for one fall.
Yeah.
It's Neo, but it's Theo. Oh, this is so bad. I was a stupid, messed up kid. What was I doing? I needed to be hit with a brick. I wasn't raised right. Now, this guy was one of those guys that everyone loved. He was everyone's best friend. He'd organise all the fun and events in the area. But he was also tall, and everyone was scared of him. So they liked him, but they were fearful of him. He was even one of the Hawks' best friends growing up. But then, one day, things started to change. Theo got in a fight with the Dave Wyatt farm kids, and there was going to be an all-out war. He was trying to raise people to go against them, but basically he handed me and this other guy a glass bottle and said tonight was the night that we're going to become men by smashing some farm kids in the head with a glass bottle. That's kind of where we called it a day with the guy. I mean, I had one more run-in with him in my childhood where it was more like almost adulthood at this point. It was late at night. He was sitting on a brick wall in the middle of it's not sure, it is a brick wall. And I asked him what he was up to. And he just casually pulled out this huge hammer out of his jacket and said, so this is what I'm up to. So I hope that guy's alright. And I also hope whoever he ran into that night is alright too. The only other guy on this game to talk about really is the Stedlow. The Stedlow has like a John Cena gimmick. I believe he's a rapper or something, or a fake wannabe rapper at least. So I was clearly being influenced by that at some point. But similar to the Stone earlier, he had his own theme music that everyone knew in the area, and they'd sing it to him. But this was unlike any other guy. He would throw a complete fit if you sang this song to him.
Paul in the gang. Yeah. Woo! Stay low. We have to stay low. Yeah. Woo! Stand.
I have one vivid memory where he was going into his garage, he was slowly closing the door, and then everyone started singing the song, and the door suddenly flew up and he burst out, and it was almost like a real wrestler making his entrance because he had the music and he had the entrance coming through the garage. It was brilliant. But then it wasn't so brilliant because he grabbed someone around their neck and pushed them to the ground and they cracked their head open. I had a really violent and horrible childhood, didn't I? So that's pretty much it really. This is just a weird video. I saw this save file and I wanted to tell some stories about people I knew growing up and gimmicks that I had in my head at the time.
Ingram! You think you're a fool?
But man, when I figured out that I created Dave Wyatt, I just had to make this video. That is the kind of content that you guys subscribe for. The Hawk created the Wyatt family. And if you don't agree with that, Farmer's shotgun with no amnesty.